February 1944. The Gestapo is turning the screws on the French resistance. Hunting down the patriots fighting for freedom. In a grim jail north of Paris, the captives await their fate. A daring plan is hatched to knock down the walls of their prison. A daylight bombing raid launched from across the channel. It's a mission for two of the greatest wartime pilots. Air Vice Marshal Basil Embry.
Once known, never forgotten. He was a legend.
And Group Captain Charles Pickard, already a national hero.
That, gentleman, is good old England, and I must say I'm damn glad to see it.
He was certainly somebody.
But with time and the weather against them, this is a mission like no other. Flying in at 250 miles per hour, just 50 feet above the sea to avoid detection. Any mistake, and they kill the people they've come to save. If they succeed, it will be one of the most daring escapes of the war. In the autumn of 1943, everyone is preparing for the Second Front. Southern Britain has become a vast military camp, awaiting the Allied invasion of France. The Germans know the invasion is coming, but they don't know where or when. All along the Atlantic coast, they are building their defenses. Behind the German lines, the resistance are a constant menace.
German soldiers weren't happy about the idea that they might be going on a patrol around a city and then they might be shot by a resistance fighter, or that their troop train might be blown up. So it created a sense of unease.
In return, the Nazis are cracking down.
There was an awful kind of to and froing between resistance action being met by terrible, terrible repression by the Germans and hundreds of people being executed in prisons up and down the country.
In Pickard, in the heart of northern France, the Germans are rounding up over 100 suspected fighters from the largest resistance networks. They are being taken to Amiens prison, a grim, high-walled building on the outskirts of the city. Among the prisoners is Jean Borant. Only 20 years old, but an expert railway saboteur. His speciality was derailing German troop trains. Now Jean Borant and his comrades face execution or deportation to Germany with little hope of escape. But they were not forgotten by this man, Dominique Ponchadier, a resistance leader operating in the Amiens area. He claims to have used his contacts in the shadowy world of Allied intelligence to come up with a daring rescue plan.
It seems that the argument he used to persuade London was that, one, this would help his resistance group, which was very closely linked to the intelligence service, but also that it would substantially increase morale in the region.
The plan was audaciously simple. An aerial attack to blast open the walls of Amiens prison, allowing the resistance fighters to escape. But to avoid killing the people they were trying to save, the raid had to be carried out with maximum precision. That meant its leader would need to be an expert in precision bombing. One of the RAF's top commanders. In early February, the mission was entrusted to No. 2 Air Group, a specialist bombing unit, led by Air Vice Marshal Basil Embry. Four years earlier, Embry had had his own experience of France under the Nazis. After being shot down and captured, he'd escaped across country, becoming the first pilot to make his way back to England via the resistance networks. So Embry had great sympathy for the plight of the prisoners in Amiens jail. Intelligence sources now briefed him that many faced executions on the 19th of February. So Embry had just over 2 weeks to launch the rescue operation. The prison would not be hard to find. It was just over an hour's flying time from the English coast to Amiens. And the large cross-shaped building lay on the straight main road heading east out of the city. But with 700 men and women in the prison, Embry knew the only way to avoid a bloodbath would be to attack in broad daylight. And that presented its own dangers. Just a few miles from the prison was a Luftwaffe fighter base with a crack squadron of Focke-Wulf 190s. To escape their attention, Embry's raiders would have to get in fast and low. Speed and surprise were going to be crucial. Fortunately for Embry, his No. 2 Air Group were now flying one of the fastest bombers in the air, the Mark 6 Mosquito. The idea of a lightweight, high-speed bomber had been the pre-war brainchild of Sir Geoffrey de Havilland. In an age when most designers were turning to metal, he decided wood was the answer. It was lighter, but many questioned whether it could stand the strain of combat.
The moment it was demonstrated in the air, the skeptics really had little ground to stand on. Even the least bright air marshal could work out that this was going to be a winner. And it didn't look back from then on, really.
De Havilland's vision paid off. Powered by its twin Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the Mosquito had a top speed of 300 miles per hour and could still carry 4 500-pound bombs.
there was a great deal of enthusiasm to fly this aeroplane, because apart from its potential to deliver its bomb load very convincingly, it was an extraordinarily nice aeroplane to fly. It was very agile, it was very maneuverable, and it was very fast.
The Mosquito was nicknamed the Wooden Wonder. Basil Embry knew he had the ideal plane for his attack on Amiens prison. Now he would need the best men to fly with him.
Okay, chaps, here we go.
One of the few pilots to match him for skill and bravery had joined his group just 6 months before. Charles Pickard was already a national hero. The unexpected star of a morale-boosting propaganda film. Target for Tonight told the story of an RAF bombing raid on Germany. The characters were all played by RAF personnel. Among them, Charles Pickard, a tall Yorkshireman, stood out as a natural-born leader. On the way back from the raid, his Wellington bomber is hit by flak.
Fire!
In zero visibility, it will take a hero to get the plane home.
Pay attention, everybody. We are over the aerodrome, but I can see practically nothing. The port engine is very rough. We could make a bit of height and jump out. Or we could have a stab at landing.
Let's try it, sir.
Okay, keep your fingers crossed.
For Pickard, it's just another flight.
I hear you made a nice landing.
I hope we haven't kept you waiting, sir.
Good Lord, no. Come and sit down. Well, how'd you get on?
Caused a hell of a great big fire. Buckets of smoke.
I'm afraid I didn't see very much. I was rather busy at the time.
Right. Good show. Good night. Good night.
But beneath the casual exterior, Charles Pickard was an exceptional pilot. In just 4 years, he flew over 100 dangerous missions. When a major commando raid was launched to capture the secrets of German radar, it was Pickard who flew the parachutists to their target zone. On their triumphant return, he made sure he was there to greet them. His reward was a Distinguished Service Order and a visit from King George VI. Pilot Officer Maxwell Sparks, one of the pilots who would later fly with Charles Pickard on the Amiens raid, recalls their first meeting.
He was certainly somebody. He was a legend. I saw this tall, blonde, gangling figure, pipe in mouth. This group captain, 4 bars up. He strode through the aircraft and got into the right-hand seat. I said, "Good morning, sir. Good morning." And that was it. I took off.
Their first flight together turned out to be an unusual experience.
I was quite happily flying, and all of a sudden, I felt something nudging my shoulder. And I looked round, straight into the face of an enormous sheepdog. It was Ming.
Between missions, Ming and Pickard were inseparable. When Pickard flew at night, Ming would wait anxiously for his return.
Every time he flew a mission, she'd usually know when he was returning, whether she was told or what, I don't know, but she'd be at the end of the runway waiting for him to land.
Many of Pickard's nighttime flights had been secret missions. Taking Allied agents to meet up with their resistance contacts in occupied France. Every flight was fraught with danger. finding his way in moonlight to remote landing strips, never knowing for certain who would be waiting. Often, Pickard had just minutes to drop off his secret passengers or pick up agents on the run from the Gestapo. Because of this experience, Pickard had seen at first hand the bravery of the French resistance. That made him the perfect man for the challenge to rescue their fellow patriots locked up in Amiens prison. But Pickard had never flown a Mosquito bomber before. And most of his operations had been at night. When he joined Embry's #2 Air Group, he would have to learn a completely new set of skills to carry out fast, low-level daylight bombing raids.
There's an old saying in Mozzies that you go in fast and you get out faster. I think it was a self-preservation rule, isn't it? The faster you go in and bomb, the faster you get out.
That rule was drilled by Embry into everyone in #2 Air Group. The men on Pickard's wing were the elite, carefully chosen from British, Australian, and New Zealand squadrons. Each Mosquito carried a tight-knit two-man team. They trained and fought together for months, if not years. Pilot Officer Sparks' regular companion was Alan Dunlop.
I'd take care of the flying, he'd take care of the course. It was a teamwork.
The long-standing partnership between Pickard and his navigator Alan Broadley had been forged during many dangerous missions. As Michael Woods recalls, using Pickard's family nickname, Uncle Boy.
They were, 23, 24 years old when they came together. And that is a very young age to be given the sort of responsibility that they were given. And I think they realised, in fact, Uncle Boy realised that his chances of surviving the war were fairly limited, and therefore, the relationship between them became that much more important. In fact, Charles Pickard decided that they would become blood brothers, so much so he pricked his arm, drew blood and pricked Broadley's arm and put them together. He said, now we're blood brothers.
Okay, first course, 089 magnetic, 089.
The partnership between pilot and navigator was vital on low-level daytime raids, where precision and timing could make the difference between success or failure.
There it is, dead ahead.
We did hours of practice bombing from various heights. We didn't have a bomb site as such because it was pilot released. But eventually we used to put crayon markings across the windscreen. When you were at a certain height, you use that crayon marking. When you were at further height, that crayon marking. And with practice, we managed to get reasonably accurate.
It was Hitler who provided the ideal opportunity for Pickard's men to hone their skills. Attacking the launch sites for Germany's secret weapon, the V1 bomb.
We'd fly low level to the target, pull up to about 1,200 feet, and then dive bomb it. put your bombs right where the ski slope was, which is the takeoff for the B-1.
The Mosquito bombers destroyed dozens of sites, even though they were hidden away deep in the countryside. The reason the Mosquitoes were so effective was they had been given the exact location of the V1 sites by the local resistance.
The resistance sent back to London detailed plans of where the launch ramps were being sited, of the location of the anti-aircraft batteries, and even of the times at which the patrols defending the anti-aircraft batteries would be changing their shifts.
It's been claimed similar detailed intelligence was reaching Basil Embry and his staff as they developed their plan of attack on Amiens prison. This information identified buildings at either end of the main prison as German guardhouses. These now became a key target. By the 8th of February, 10 days before his deadline, Embry's plan was taking shape. With each of his Mosquitoes carrying 4 500-pound bombs, Embry calculated he would need to deliver a minimum of 48 bombs to pierce the outer walls and destroy the German guardhouses. That meant an operation for 12 planes. These bombs would be fitted with special tail fuses delaying detonation for 11 seconds, so the pilots flying in close formation at tree height could get away before the bombs went off.
You rely on extreme timing. There's no way you want to go into the bomb blast of the bloke in front. It's all done on timing.
Despite the risks and his high rank, Air Vice Marshal Basil Embry was determined to lead the Mosquitoes, which would attack in a series of carefully timed formations. 6 New Zealand pilots would fly in the first wave to attack the outer walls from the east and the north. Then the Australian wave of 6 Mosquitoes would also come in from the east. Their targets were the German guardhouses. Once these bombers were heading home, a specially equipped Mosquito carrying high-definition cameras would then fly over the prison. As well as gathering valuable reconnaissance information, the pilot of this plane would have a crucial responsibility: to decide whether the walls had been breached enough to allow the prisoners to escape. If not, he had the option to call in a final reserve of 6 Mosquitoes, flying in 10 minutes behind him. These would be carrying another 24 bombs. Their grim orders were to destroy the prison entirely. Embry had been assured that the resistance prisoners would rather die by British bombs than by German bullets. To deal with the threat to his own men from German fighters near the prison, Embry ordered 2 squadrons of Typhoons to flight cover throughout the raid. The final details were now coming together. Intelligence reported that the German guards always had their lunch at 12 noon. This would be the best moment to attack. But time was running out. There was just over a week to go before the threatened executions on the 19th. At this critical stage, Embry was hit by 2 major problems. First, the weather. It was atrocious. Blizzard conditions were sweeping across northern France. Embry's forecasters couldn't tell if it would clear in time. The second issue also came from above. From Basil Embry's boss, Air Chief Marshal Lee Mallory. On the 10th of February, with just days to go before the raid, he suddenly decided Embry should not fly. No one really knows why. Perhaps Embry knew too much about the intelligence sources behind the raid, or was just too important to risk. From now on, it would be Charles Pickard's mission. The 28-year-old group captain had the lives of nearly 40 airmen and many hundred French prisoners in his hands. Events in France soon raised the stakes even higher. On the 14th of February, the Germans arrested another senior member of the resistance. Local official Raymond Vivant had been well placed to gather information for the Allies. Now he too was in Amiens prison. The following day, 2 agents run by British intelligence were also rounded up. By the 16th of February, the weather in England was also closing in. Among the pilots, tension was mounting.
We were all confined to camp for 48 hours, so we knew there was something on, but what, I had no idea. None of us had. It was tight security throughout the camp.
By the 17th, there was a heavy blizzard. At 8 o'clock in the morning on the 18th, the weather was still atrocious.
On the way to breakfast, it was snowing. We had low cloud, looked about 100 feet. We weren't going to fly that day, boy.
But with the executions due in the next 24 hours, Basil Embry joined Charles Pickard to brief the pilots.
When we got to the briefing room and were told we were going to go no matter what.
The pilots would finally discover what their top secret mission was going to be.
Basil Embry stood up and he said, "Right, gentlemen, I have a special target for you today. It's Amiens." And we thought, oh God, marshalling yards again. And he said, "Oh no, it's not a marshalling yard." He said, "Your target for today is Amiens prison."
Pickard then explained the plan: to knock down the walls and free the resistance fighters.
He said, "It'll be done by 3 squadrons. The 3rd squadron will be in reserve. And if necessary, you'll be called in to obliterate the prison completely." Nobody wanted to be in the 3rd squadron. That was the dirty job.
The dirty job fell to the mainly British No. 21 Squadron.
I gather earlier on, the wing commanders had tossed for it.
Pickard then tried to reassure his pilots.
He ended up by saying that the French resistance had notified command that in the event of the prison not being broken open, they preferred to die by British bombs. And at about 11:15, we got in the aircraft and started up at about 2 or 3 minutes to 11.
The Mosquito bombers began taking off in the order of attack. First, the 6 New Zealanders, including Maxwell Sparks. Their bombs were to pierce the outer walls. Then, the Australian wave. Their target was the German guardhouses. Group Captain Pickard had chosen to fly at the back of their formation. But that morning, he had made a dramatic change to Embry's plan. Instead of the pilot in the camera plane, Pickard was now taking on the grim responsibility of deciding whether to call in the 6 reserve Mosquitoes, following 10 minutes behind him. As a result, he'd be flying around the prison for several minutes. And that meant breaking Embry's golden rule to get out fast.
After he dropped his bombs, he was going to mosey round, have a look at the prison, and make a decision whether 21 Squadron were to come in and do their job.
But before Pickard would have to make that dreadful call whether to destroy the prison or not, there were other problems ahead. As they crossed the coast at Littlehampton, they were due to meet up with their fighter escort of Typhoons. A very welcome protection against the Luftwaffe's crack fighters near the prison. But the bad weather was already disrupting Pickard's carefully laid plans. 4 of the 12 fighters failed to make the rendezvous, and 4 of Pickard's Mosquitoes had to turn back before they got across the channel. The rest flew on at wave height, hoping to avoid detection.
If we kept low enough and fast enough, we should be able to get away with it.
Once over France, the Mosquitoes took a curving course, approaching Amiens from the northeast. On the ground, the bells in Amiens Cathedral began striking 12. The attack was running just a couple of minutes late. Maxwell Sparks was in the first wave of New Zealanders due to attack the prison's outer wall from the east. At 12:02, he was hurtling down the straight road leading toward Amiens prison.
We hugged that road. About 6 or 8 miles out, there were poplars along the road, and I had to keep my wing tilted up in the air a bit.
Seconds before reaching the prison, they dropped even lower.
We're about 10, 12 feet, something like that. It's the lowest I've ever flown. I wouldn't want to fly any lower. I had one eye on the wall and one eye on the bomb underneath the leader's wing. I was level with his tailplane. The moment I saw his bomb go, pressed my bomb tit. The bomb's dropping off. The aircraft rose in the air, full power. I shot over the wall. And as I looked down on the right, we passed the watchtower on the top of the prison. It was about 50 feet. And I looked into the face of a startled guard. My navigator told me later that he was actually smoking a cigarette. And then it was down onto the deck and out.
A minute later, the other New Zealand Mosquitoes swung in to attack the northern wall. But the operation was still running a crucial 2 minutes late. To avoid the New Zealanders exploding bombs, the Australian Mosquitoes had to turn in a wide circle, delaying their attack on the guardhouses. But as the Australians left for home, there was a plane missing. There was no sign of Charles Pickard, and the reserve Mosquitoes were now just minutes away, expecting his orders to attack or head for home. The camera plane now flew in, beginning a series of runs over the prison. Its pilot, Flight Lieutenant Wickham, would later describe the scene.
The ends were blown off the building, the outer walls were breached. In the yard was a large group of prisoners making good their escape. 3 of them already got through the outer walls and were heading for the fields.
In Pickard's absence, Wickham gave the okay to call off the reserve.
I gave them the pre-arranged signal to take their bombs home. Hello, Daddy. Red, red, red.
The rest of the Mosquitoes were already on their way home, dodging enemy fighters and flak. Maxwell Sparks' plane was hit.
The hole, it was about that size. And I didn't think I could make base. We discussed ditching, but we didn't like the idea of that.
Sparks finally made it back across the channel, landing at an emergency airfield. As each Mosquito returned, concern grew for their missing leader. As night fell, there were still 2 planes unaccounted for. One from the New Zealand squadron, and one flown by Charles Pickard and his navigator, Alan Broadley. For Pickard's wife and family, the news was devastating.
Our Uncle Walter, who was then CEO of Lynham Aerodrome, announced to the whole family that Uncle Boy had gone missing. He said he couldn't tell us what the mission was, but he was missing. He might be okay, but they didn't know.
For months afterwards, the British public still hoped that their hero from Target for Tonight would somehow return unscathed. But Charles Pickard never would return. And it was only after the invasion of France that Pickard's commanding officer, Air Vice Marshal Basil Embry, would find out what happened to Pickard and Broadley and the resistance prisoners they had tried to save. On the 31st of August, 1944, the city of Amiens was finally liberated by Allied troops. Only then was the grim truth about Pickard's last moments revealed. Dr. Jean-Pierre Ducellier has spent many years studying the raid. He now takes over the story.
Alors l'avion de Pickard est arrivé là au-dessus du village de Saint-Gratien, qu'on voit là-bas, venant du sud-ouest, poursuivi par un Focke-Wulf 190. À ce moment-là, le Focke-Wulf a ouvert le feu. Et l'avion de Pickard, le Mosquito, s'est brisé en 2. La queue tombant devant nous, là. Et le reste de l'avion un petit peu plus haut, devant le bois qu'il y a là derrière nous. Au milieu d'arbres un peu dispersés. Les débris étant en feu.
Local villagers recovered the bodies of Pickard and Broadley and carried them into their village to be buried in a temporary grave. In the field where they died, their plane is long gone. But aviation archaeologist Simon Parry has found a few last fragments.
Hi. Oui, ça va. Oui, ça va. So it's part of the harness that would be worn by Pickard or Broadley.
Okay.
So you can't get much closer to the two people than that.
Okay.
The two blood brothers had paid the ultimate sacrifice.
The whole family were absolutely devastated. Our grandmother was totally devastated. She actually never ever got over his death.
The Mosquito's attack on Amiens prison was finally made public in October 1944. Officially, it was a great success, a triumph of precision bombing. They said many of the resistance prisoners condemned to death had been set free. The Mosquito crews were hailed as heroes. Pickard's last raid had sealed his place among the great warriors of World War II. The raid on Amiens prison entered wartime legend as Operation Jericho, a triumphant biblical reference to when Joshua and his trumpets brought the walls of Jericho tumbling down. But in Amiens, the story of what happened at the prison was not so clear-cut. It was true that some 250 prisoners had initially escaped into the surrounding fields. But only about 50 of them were likely to have been members of the resistance, and many were soon recaptured. Among the few that got away were Jean Borant and Raymond Vivant. But their narrow escape had been bought at a very heavy cost. The attack had not been quite as precise as the official account suggested. The outer walls had been breached, but the prison itself was a mess. In the north wing, a massive concrete floor had collapsed. The death and destruction was shocking for one of the patriots who had been in the prison.
Too many victims. You know, there were near 100 people who were killed. It's too much. If I had escaped, the Gestapo would have taken my wife and my children.
In fact, the raid was so destructive. Over the years, many people have begun to question the official reason why it was launched.
A number of factors make it very unusual. The fact that they were trying to free a small number of prisoners, allegedly, the fact that they were devoting such a large number of aircraft to this attack do make it very mysterious.
The traditional explanation seemed so mysterious to Dr. Dusselier that he decided to investigate it, coming up with a theory to challenge the legend of Operation Jericho. First, he dismisses the idea that resistance leader Dominique Ponchadier, asked for the raid.
Alors, la résistance n'a jamais rien fourni sur la prison. Je suis catégorique et je n'ai jamais trouvé la moindre information sérieuse ou le moindre témoin qui puisse évoquer simplement des renseignements concernant la prison ou la position des Allemands dans la prison, ou etc.
Second, Ducellier believes the official reason for the raid simply wasn't true. The idea that 120 prisoners were about to be executed was a myth.
J'ai vérifié dans toutes les archives, y compris les archives des tribunaux et du tribunal militaire d'exception allemand. C'était absolument certain qu'il n'y avait personne qui pouvait intéresser les Britanniques pour les faire sortir, pour les sauver. Il n'y avait personne qui allait être condamné, personne de condamné à mort. Pourquoi donc attaquer la prison, puisque je suis absolument certain qu'aucun résistant n'était à libérer pour des raisons de risque d'exécution.
If Ducellier is right, then what was the reason for the raid? The answer may lie in Britain in 1944, when preparations for the invasion of France were well underway. Allied command was determined to keep the Germans guessing where and when the landings would take place. Elaborate deception plans were conceived, involving everything from dummy tanks and fake armies to the planting of misinformation by double agents. Operation Fortitude was to convince the Germans that the invasion would take place near Calais, not Normandy. It is Dr. Ducellier's theory that the raid on Amiens prison was part of this deception plan. If true, the prisoners and aircrew who lost their lives were sacrificed as part of a much bigger operation. But to date, the definitive proof is still missing.
We have absolutely no evidence that the Amiens raid was in any way part of an overall deception plot by the Allies. That doesn't mean to say that it wasn't, but we have absolutely no reason to think that that was the case.
L'affaire a été cloisonnée de manière exceptionnelle, enfin peut-être pas exceptionnelle pour les Britanniques, mais exceptionnelle.
Whatever the truth behind the raid, the heroic pilots who carried it out clearly believed the official reason for their mission. But over time, they have recognized just how unusual a mission it was.
Right in the beginning, it was controversial to even think about it. And it was controversial whether it should have been done or shouldn't. That's all I can say about it.